Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Tuesday 10 at 10. We have quite a bit of questions to cover over the last week. Tons came in again because Richard is so good at this. I have invited him back with me to help solve all your questions. All right, you ready, Richard?
I'm ready. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, and Richard is from Baking Innovations. He's helping us with the consulting. So if you need more help from Richard, reach out to him on our consultants page. All right, first up is from the flour tortilla page, Richard. What would you recommend as a good machine to make 800 to 1,000 pieces of tortilla per hour?
All right. So right now, not knowing, if they want, because there's two ways of making tortillas. There is the sheeted and die cut, and there's the pressed. So I'm assuming it's on a small line. There is the Besco Beta 900 that actually does 900 tortillas per hour. And I would recommend go on eBay, go online, look for used equipment. There's plenty there, and it's simple to operate. I've seen it done in shops, so it takes one operator or two. Very easy one.
What brand again? What's the brand name?
It's called Besco Beta BETA 900
All
for
right.
900 per hour. Yeah.
Thank you. You got your answer. So go and buy a tortilla press machine. All right. Next question is from our episode 20 on frozen dough and ascorbic acid. Thank you for your website. Learned so much. You're welcome. This is an endless resource for the commercial baker. Here is my question. You stated that ascorbic acid should only be used in shorter fermentation times, approximately 2 hours. Why is that? What is happening when you ferment your bread dough for longer than that with ascorbic acid? How much longer, like 12 hours in sourdough? Question mark. An explanation would be very helpful for me. I live in Canada, and every bag of flour available to me has ascorbic acid as the second or third ingredient in the list after wheat flour. This might explain why my sourdough experiments have not been ideal. Thank you in advance. James from Toronto. So, Richard, what do you think?
Well, I think, yes, you could, but it's counterproductive, as you're putting an oxidizing, or it's first a reducing agent, but in the contact of oxygen, it becomes an oxidizing agent, and it helps create strength. So as with the sourdough, it's enzymatically the time you're creating the strength and the gluten development. So right now I would say keep on looking. I'm sure
it's not ideal to have ascorbic acid in there. I mean, if you want to put dough conditioners, wouldn't you put it on the dough side after the ferment?
Yes, and a lot of the millers do put the ascorbic acid also to help them out with maturity of the flour, from what I understand. So it's there to help the bakers, but I agree it's best to not put it there. So keep on looking. There's plenty of flour available with that enrichment. Just look a little harder. Look online, and you'll find a flour that suits you. It'd be easier than try to formulate around the ascorbic acid.
That's true. And also you can always use the starter part without that flour, like maybe a whole wheat flour or a rye flour. They wouldn't have that kind of ascorbic acid in there for your sourdough. And your sourdough, sourdough portion, just ferment without the ascorbic acid, and then put in the ascorbic acid as you do the final mixing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so gluten page. I want to know if a non-gluten protein, if such exists, would function well to replace wheat flour. You'll go first.
The first and simple answer, no.
Yeah.
Gluten is gliadin and glutathione.
If you came up with such a protein, I think you'll be like a multi-billionaire.
Oh yeah, everybody would want it. Although you do I've heard, and I've not played, but I mentioned my good Dr. Ali, who says through proper enzymes, you can help create strength and replace gluten, which I'd love to see. But no,
I would love for you to get Dr. Ali on one of our podcasts, and let's talk a little bit more about that. Haven't heard that one before.
Yep, and he is good as an old school enzymologist, so he knows quite a lot. But from going back to the question, no, you can find other protein, they work well, but nothing to replace truly gluten, because once you build your gluten network, it really the simple analogy, like a balloon, it just helps expand. Nothing works to that level. It's going to be playing what everybody's playing with, some gums and other ingredients available today, and it's all trial and error. There's no secret solution. As Dr. Carson said, the person creating it will be the next brilliant idea. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so next is from a bread baking test page. Hi, I have a 3-DAC Lucy oven, which has 2 temperature settings on the top and bottom, sensor for all 3 DACs. Please advise on the best temperature setting for loaves, scones, and cakes.
All right.
I have no experience with this particular DAC oven, and DAC ovens are extremely hard to control temperatures, especially if it's old. So what's your opinion, Richard?
Well, I've worked with a similar oven where we had top and bottom. So when you're talking with a DAC, let's go back to the principle. We're talking about conduction. Unless you have fan, then you have convection, and if that's different, but right now it's conduction. So if it's something small, as a rule of thumb, what do? You put a higher temperature if it's a small item, and you put 400 degrees or higher. And if it's a bigger cake, you want to go 325 to 350.
Low.
So if you think on the bottom where you put your sheet pan, it's going to be where the heat transfers first. So the bottom, so you have to regulate top and bottom, not knowing your oven at the edge and how calibrated it is. I would say just play with it, but often you want more heat on the top, unless it's a high sugar content, where it's going to brown very quickly, and then you need to reduce it. But as a rule of thumb, for a smaller scone, I would go 375 to 400 and just play with your zone and put less on the bottom and a little more on the top.
So is that going to be the rule for all products? Less on the bottom, more on the top, except for high sugar products?
For high sugar, unless you have a fan and you have convection, then it's a different.
I don't think that's.
Yeah, not on those ovens, not the one we had. It was very simple, and as a rule of thumb versus a convection, it takes an extra 20 to 30% more time to bake with that versus a convection oven. I don't recommend baking sweet goods. I understand a lot of bakers will do everything out of one place, but it's a little more challenging, because often when you bake it directly on the deck, you get a lot of the bottom gets burned quickly. So it's always good to get more heat. If you have the electrical tubes, and I'm assuming it's electrical, then you can apply a little heat, almost like you're at home with your broiler. You put the broiler just to get the top brown.
Yeah. So, the best is, if you ever are in a position to buy a DAC oven, I think really your best bet would be just to use it for bread, pizza product. If you have the choice, if you're going to be a very versatile baker, and if you have the choice, really get a convection rotary, oven, where it's more versatile to bake breads, cookies, any kind of bakery products. But the DAC oven is really, really very limited in its offering in terms of versatility. So I hope that helps. Next would be pre-ferment page. The question is, can pre-ferment be done with instant dry yeast?
Yes.
Yay! Do tell.
Yeah, that's you can use it as long as it's a yeast and you get some activity. You just need to know, if you go from a cake crumbled yeast, there's a rule of thumb that says 0.33 of what you're using has to be dry instant. On the active, I think, if I recall, it's 0.45 or something similar, or a half has to be And there's a conversion charts that you can find online. If not, just shoot us an email and we'll be glad to answer. But yes, you can.
Right. And I think the concern is really, will it expire, right? I mean, if it's too long of a pre-ferment, will it still be active?
Yes, and what I see as a pre-ferment is just you would see it if your yeast is too old, and if you have the right environment and the right temperature, you'll see it bubbling up. Usually, what I call as a pre-ferment is an hour to 2 hours. You know, you're fermenting, pre-fermenting the flour and the portion of flour, whether or not it's a biga on the more firmer side or liquid brew that is pourable. So either way, you can measure, you know, the typical pouliche as well. When you see that your pre-ferment goes up, and as soon as you start being concave in the center, that means it's ready.
Ah, interesting. Great. Okay, next question from our water activity page. Hi, I would like to know what the standard water activity for baked chocolate chip cookies is. It appears to be around 0.3 to 0.35, but I would like a confirmation.
Well, I confirm that, yes, I've worked a lot with cookies and it's around there.
Right, I confirm too, so you're good to go. CMC page, if I add CMC in the bread formula with gluten, this helps me to bind water and decrease water activity? 3 question marks after that.
Adding, see, here's the deal to whoever asked the
question. I don't know if you want to add gluten with CMC, but go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. You know, anything as a rule of thumb, when you add ingredients to your formulation, and that's seen a lot of bakers do it. Once you add it and you put it in, and you don't hydrate it properly, you don't change your mixing or you don't change your water content, you're going to create a problem in the long run. That means a day or 2 later, your bread is going to start being chewy and tough. So, and if you add anything in, and it's to a dry, quote unquote dry, because flour contains moisture, dry ingredient powder, hydrate it. And if you add CMC, it's going to help retain, it's highly hygroscopic. So it's going to bring more water for itself. So you would need to, technically, your water activity is going to go up. If you want to reduce water activity, there are other methods. Such as, by the way, did you see you can use glycerin?
Oh my God, that's funny. I love glycerin. Hey, since we're talking about t-shirts, can you see this one? This is for your baking friends. If you don't like,
if you, what does it say? It's blurry. If you bake it,
if you bake it, this is the problem with green screens, right? So. Can't see. If you bake it, I will eat it.
I like that. We should talk about shirts too. I have a lot of funny shirts.
Yeah, we'll just compare who has the funniest shirt every session.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, CMC.
Glycerin is one of the best, you know, things to use to lower water activity. Yeah. But the problem with lowering water activity is that every ingredient you add, you have to add more water. Right, yep. So you really don't know at the end of the day whether you really lower the water activity or not. All I've seen so far in terms of bread, water activity I've done a lot of experiments. It's not gone down below 0.8. I don't know what's your experience, Richard, but I have not been able to bring it down to below 0.8, regardless of what you do to that. Okay.
Yep.
The only thing is if you put a lot of sugar, and then if you put a ton of sugar, you'll get it down, I believe, but it's just too sweet, right? So my suggestion is usually don't use all these things to reduce water activity. You will get a bread product that tastes like cardboard, you know? So my suggestion is don't use CMC, don't use gluten to reduce water activity. Instead use sugar and fats, you know, but there's only so much you can do with water activity in bread. And if that's your main point, to get that water activity down, you have to use cultured wheat or Calpro to prevent molding. You know, at the end of the day, that's what you're after if you're going to look at your water activity. So, do you have any more comments about that, Richard, before we move
Well,
on?
that I would say I did a lot of work on shelf life extension, and we did on the bread, let's say a fried bread product, with a water activity of zero point 0.9, which was, right around there, get a shelf life of 120 days with mold free. So there are possibilities. It's about understanding, as Dr. Carson said, your pH also, how well effective it's going to work with the mold preservation system you're putting in, because they have different pKa of which they perform better. But everything is doable. It's all about understanding, applying the art and the science together, and then to get your product where you need to be. And that's why we're here to help.
Yeah, and you know what, Richard? It's like week after week after week, even before I brought you on, every week I have had a shelf life question. Perhaps it would be in the best interest of everyone that we have a seminar on this. What do you think?
I would do that. And by the way, a good friend of mine, Dr. Lang, has his PhD in water and water activity and shelf life. He's the
Love to bring him on.
Guru of maybe it's going to be a little complex, but if you want to have a seminar for it, that would be good to have people listen to. How do you control water?
I think I would want to do a seminar on that, because it's like people keep asking water activity questions. Well, mainly because I've been pushing it, right? Because I've been talking a lot about it. But I think we really need to address it in the podcast and the seminar, and really, hand it to people. Here's what the expert says on water activity and what you need to do, right? Because if we don't address that, then we're gonna have these questions coming week after week again. I mean, it's just like, to me, I'm like, this is indication to me that a lot of people out there do not have the necessary training to understand shelf life. Correct. And if we pull a seminar together to help people understand that, then hopefully the questions will stop coming in.
I like that.
I will look into it. Okay. Yeah. So last question. No, wait, second last question. My natural dough relaxer go-to ingredient has been deactivated dry yeast. What is your experience with the use of deactivated dried yeast? It seems so simple that a lot of the ingredient providers of the world have concocted their own blend using this ingredient, which has great properties for relaxing dough. So what do you think, Richard?
I think it's a great ingredient, but I personally will pass. I'm not a fan, and I will tell you why. The reason why I'm not a fan, and I've worked in commercial bakeries in the past. So let's use the example of a cinnamon roll, for example. If you put it in, it helps relax your dough perfectly on the first dough. But there is if you look at the logarithmic equation, you're going to take the trims that you're trimming and you're putting it back inside. So your dough rheology, meaning the dough texture, will change throughout the day. And I've helped so many bakeries go there. If you're running 2 doughs, you're fine. If you're running longer and you're reusing your trim, you're going to see the rheology, and the people will get frustrated. And what do they do when they get frustrated on the table? They add more flour, and more gluten, and less water. So you're changing your product throughout the day. The key to baking, and I re-emphasize that all the time, is consistency. How do you create consistency? And that's what people come back for, what the experience they get. So, but no, I'm not a big fan of glutathione or deactivated dry yeast.
Yeah, and just my take on that as well. I am with Richard. If you need to use it, that's no choice. You have to use some kind of relaxer at the mixing station to reduce the mix time and to get it sheet properly. But DDY is something that you can't control, right? So in fact, if you take L-cysteine and DDY, L-cysteine, you can predict its reaction. DDY, you can't. L-cysteine, you can control very well. DDY, you can't. And L-cysteine is all about finding the right dosage, and it will work perfect, right? So, so that's the difference between DDY and L-cysteine. Is just depends on what your original purpose is, and you can control one better and not the other. Okay. But don't use it like it's the God sent magical ingredient, because it will ruin your system if you don't, if you're not trained well enough to use it. Okay.
And one quick last point on that, I did work with One Ingredients because I did a lot of work in that segment. How do you relax the dough and you can run fast enough and you don't have issues? I came across an ingredient which was an enzyme technology, and that helps with reducing, but doesn't affect your doughyology. So it doesn't affect your volume. So if you want questions on that, then I can guide you to the right people easily. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Enzyme solutions are out there, you know, but then again, you have to like really be cognizant of what you're dosing and who is dosing it.
Yep.
So it's better to like really reach out to your ingredient provider and do that, you know, than rather, you know, buying something and just dosing it yourself. So it's not always a good solution. All right, so last question. We have gotten to the bottom of our queue. I hope you're doing well. Can you tell me if I could find a definition for raisin bread?
Well, very simple. According to the CFR Title 21, Article 136.160, and I repeated 136.160. In order to call a bread a raisin bread, you need to have 50 parts of raisin for 100 parts of flour weight. So basically 50% on 100% baker's percent.
Yep. So if you need more information on that, go to the FDA website and put in a CFR number that Richard just give you. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our Tuesday 10 at 10 today. And if you have any more questions, go to our website, bakerpedia.com. and put it there. And if you're lucky, Richard and myself will be back next week, Tuesday, 10 at 10, and on our website to answer your questions. Thank you.
All right. Keep happy baking. Thank you. Bye.